In this video, I want to talk about the satanic propaganda of culture. Your culture is supposed to be embedded in Christ. Your entire identity is supposed to be in Christ. That's what you have been created and designed for. You have not been created and designed to become attached to the color of your skin, the place you were born, your ethnic heritage, or anything else of this world or carnality. It is an outright lie. What fields and disciplines like psychology and sociology have attempted to do is, in their demonic worldly authority, they make everything about race, everything about gender, everything about superficial, unimportant things that identify you, and then they say, that's what you've been missing this whole time. That's what you've been missing. It's because you're in a white culture. You're in America, the worst place ever. And they just took away your culture. Guess what? There are cultures that do really stupid and harmful things. But psychology and the field of mental health would have you believing that anything is okay, anything goes in the name of culture. Do you know that there are some places in India where it's still legal for you to cut your genitalia off and sacrifice it to your false god? Do you know that in African culture, it is normal to infibulate, to mutilate the genitalia of a young girl? Do you know that in Mexican culture, they worship and venerate a demon they call the Lady of Guadalupe, and that right now they are preparing for a festival called Day of the Dead, in which they set up altars to the dead, and some call it Christian, and adorn their altars with the Lady of Guadalupe, with crosses, with false gods, with skulls. Do you understand that if you glorify death, if you call on the dead, that's exactly what awaits you? Do you remember that King Saul called on the dead? Like, does anyone remember what's written in the Bible that you're not to do that or set up altars to anything but God? So here's the trick in that propaganda. Anything goes. Everything is acceptable as long as it's done under the justification of culture. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable for people to try to get rid of their HIV by raping a baby. It's not acceptable to send your young children to a witch camp where they're beat so badly that if they die, people just say, well, they were a witch. That's what happened. They were a witch. And they've got scars all over their backs as adults. It's not acceptable to cut out the genitalia of a little girl. It's not acceptable to set up altars to false gods and the dead. Catholicism is not your culture. That is not your identity. I'm Irish, so I must be Catholic. I'm Mexican, so I must be Catholic. This is a trick to replace your identity in Christ. It's a trick to convince you that that void, that longing that you feel to belong and to have an identity in Christ, in the one who created you to be connected to him, for him to be in you and you in him. It is a trick to replace that with things like cultural identity. When did God ever talk about that? Ethnic identity? What is that? Nothing. It's nothing. Get out of that mentality. It separates us. I have never seen certain people in the assembly, nor do I care to see what they look like. I don't personally care about their ethnic identity. I care about where we're going, not where we've been. I don't care about the things that identify us here in this life, because these things are going to pass away. And each of you should be able to recognize the fruit of that satanic propaganda. You should be able to see that every time there's an election coming up, race suddenly becomes an issue. Cultural identity suddenly becomes an issue. You should be able to see that this is weaponized in order for you to not say anything bad about certain groups of people who are engaging in bad behavior that needs to be addressed. Oh no, that's their culture. You can't say anything bad about that. Who says? Bad behavior is bad behavior. I don't care about the color of your skin, and I don't care about whatever cultural identity people are hiding behind. I frankly do not. Now, if you can see that, if you can see that the politicians of this world use cultural identity as a weapon, and you know what spirit that is, what spirit is using it in counterfeit Christianity? What spirit has taken Israel? Not all who are descended from Israel are Israel. Jews. A Jew is not a Jew who is one outwardly, but inwardly through circumcision of the heart. Abraham's descendants. Not all who are descended from Abraham are Abraham's children. So what spirit has distorted that? What spirit has made that out to be an ethnicity and placed all of the burden on that ethnicity and made up some narrative that everything's going to happen in the land of Israel to ethnic Jews? Christians, Gentile Christians have no covenant, no covenant whatsoever, no responsibilities in their contract. Ridiculous. I mean, talk about stupid woke ideology. This is like woke on steroids, guys. Stupid. Absolutely stupid. What spirit is that keeps making all of this about ethnicity? The same spirit who does it in the world. Only you're supposed to know better. You want to sit around and judge all the LGBTQ++, people dressed up like cats and dogs, werewolves, their critical race theory, the world that excuses everybody from bad behavior. You want to judge that? This is a plank speck issue. That has been done to show you the ridiculousness that's going on in counterfeit Christianity. The ridiculous ways that people think and justify themselves and condemn everybody else, condemn all the pagans who don't know better. Do you know that the word says that if we take the plank out of our own eye, we'll be able to help our brother to take the speck out of his? What's race, guys? What is ethnicity? I don't care what the world has been saying, and I don't care that what I'm saying is not popular or that people are going to be upset about it. I don't care. It is the truth. This is stupid. Our identity is in Christ, and that's it. And if we don't have him, we don't have anything. It doesn't matter how many different things that we try to fill ourselves with in order to replace that. We will always be wanting. We will always be longing. We will always be empty because none of those things were meant to fill us. Nothing can replace our identity in Christ. It's not going to be any different from trying to replace Christ with money and shoes and clothes. It won't be any different. You can spend years and years in therapy, have the biggest support system ever, all the dumb things that they teach you there, right? And still be utterly empty. Why? Because your identity is in Christ, and that's it. You were created for God's good pleasure, not yours. And the Christ who purchased you prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane to the Father for those whom he had chosen for Christ, that we would be one, that he would be in us and we would be in him. How can any other identity possibly make you whole? It can't. Cultural identity is a lie. Might be part of your testimony, might be part of your experiences. It is not your identity. It's part of your experiences. I share my testimony with you in A Soul Aligned. I talked about my experiences growing up. Is that my identity? No. It's part of my experiences, part of the testimony that God has used to build me in a particular way. It is not my identity. My identity is in Christ. It's in what Christ has been doing with what he has sent in my life, so that I can be in him, so that I can suffer with him and serve him. You think we're going to be looking back in eternity, talking about our cultural identity? Give me a break. Everything here is temporary. If we're going into salvation, if we are entering the kingdom of heaven and entering that salvation, then everything here is tentative. It's temporary. If you want to make this permanent, you won't be going up with Christ. I can tell you that. That's going to need to become your mentality. That's going to need to be coming out of your heart, that you don't belong to anything else. Not an ideology, not a propaganda, not an agenda. You belong to Christ, and you have to live in his name, in his will, not in the agenda of the world. Please discern this message with God.